Hello and welcome along to the match as Real Madrid's penultimate game of the La Liga season takes them to Celta-Vigo on Sunday evening. Now, things looking tricky for Real Madrid in terms of the title, but mathematically things are still far from over. Joining me as ever to preview the game in Celta-Vigo and also look ahead to some of the other fixtures in La Liga this weekend is Sid Lowe. Sid, welcome along.
Thanks very much.
Now, as we said, you know, things aren't looking great for Real Madrid, but it is still possible.
It is still possible, and for as long as it's possible, this season, more than any other season for a very, very long time, we've learnt not to take anything for granted. It's less than a week since Barcelona's players came out and said, that's it, there's no title for us. Since Andres Iniesta came out and said, it would take a miracle, and I don't believe in miracles. The following day, we had dropped points for both Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid. Suddenly it looked like Real Madrid were possibly even in the strongest position of the three teams. Then, of course, 3 days after that, Real Madrid then lose to Valladolid, which admittedly draw. It felt like a loss, didn't it, for Madrid fans, I think. Even if it does put them in a very difficult position, I think we've reached a point this year that we're not taking anything for granted one way or the other.
We're not. There have been many twists and turns in this La Liga title race, and doubtless there will be one or two more before the end of the season. We'll look ahead to the game in Galicia in just a moment, but first we do have to reflect on that disappointing 1-1 draw in Valladolid on Wednesday evening. Has to be said that a 1-1 draw at this stage of the season wasn't necessarily good enough for Real Madrid. It wasn't a pretty game, was it, Sid?
No, it wasn't. And I think it was the kind of game that I think Madrid, having got the goal through Sergio Ramos, felt like once they were 1-0 up, they just had to protect it. I think physically and perhaps even emotionally is not quite the right word, but I think there was a sort of a mental fatigue about them. And I think they probably felt that once they're in the lead that they just had to cling hold of it and to make sure they didn't get caught out with Cristiano Ronaldo going off early with a little bit of muscle fatigue. We're not actually 100% sure yet whether he'll play this weekend. We're still 2 days away from the game when we've gone to recording. And I felt that Madrid were kind of sluggish, but it did look for a long time like they'd done enough, because in truth, while Valladolid came back at them in the last 15 minutes or so, there was only really two chances. One was the goal and one was the overhead kick that went wide. In other words, shots on target, just the one. The goal, I must confess, I hadn't appreciated first time round from Valladolid, was a little fortunate. And I think at this point, when Ramos put them in the lead, I don't think anyone really doubted that Real Madrid would win.
No, but sadly they didn't go on and win, because the Colombian substitute Osorio came off the bench and did this. It wasn't as good a header as you initially thought.
Initially I thought it was an absolutely brilliant header,
yeah.
But watching it again, it took a deflection, and that was part of the reason why it escaped Casillas and into the corner. Madrid then in truth, I think, found it very, very difficult to react. Admittedly, they only had 5 or 6 minutes in which to do it, but in any case, it was as if they were all just a bit heavy-legged, a little bit lacking in ideas. Ancelotti described it as mental intensity, I think was the word that he was saying. So that sense of concentration, of being very quick to every ball, but not quick in terms of being physically quick, but quick in other words, you react faster than anyone else. You're really tuned in, you're really focused. And there was a slight sluggishness about Madrid, which I think goes some of the way, at least, to explaining them dropping 2 points.
A disappointing result for Real Madrid. Disappointing to have dropped 2 points, but let's try and get some positives out of the game. One of them was Sergio Ramos scoring and producing another sensational performance. Since the turn of the year, he's been absolutely brilliant, and in the last few weeks, in front of goal, he's been amazing as well. 5 goals in his last 4 matches.
5 in 4 games for a centre-back who admittedly has always had a bit of a centre-forward soul. He's always wanted goals. I remember seeing an interview with him that I was really struck by at the end of the 2010 World Cup. Now, this is Spain winning the World Cup for the first time ever, and an interview with Sergio Ramos in which he said, I was quite disappointed not to have scored. And I remember thinking, you're a defender. But I think that explains the way that Ramos really likes to enjoy his football, likes to be involved beyond just defending. And I personally, and I've argued this with a lot of people, particularly in the UK, I personally think he's one of the best 2 or 3 defenders in the world. And it is true that every season he has a couple of months where it's not quite working for him. But he has a habit of being right when it really matters. He has a habit of reaching March, April and May in really, really good shape and performing really well in the big games. And of course, none bigger than the 2 goals he got against Bayern Munich in the semi-final.
This was his 400th game for Real Madrid. He's still young as well, still only 28. He he's not quite a club legend, but he's close.
Well, he's not far off at all.
Yeah.
And I think if he was to play, for example, a key role in winning the Champions League, obviously he's already played a key role in the semi-final, but if Madrid go on and win the Champions League this year, the 10th European Cup, which of course I think is the one that everybody's waiting for, perhaps more than any of the others, except maybe the 7th, because of that 32-year wait. And if he was to play really well in the final, and who knows, maybe even score again, there's absolutely no doubt that he'd be a club legend. Because he joined so young from Sevilla, despite not being from Madrid, it almost feels like he's been a Madrid player all of his career. Although personally, I still remember him playing brilliantly at Sevilla as well. And I think you're right. I think he's very, very close to becoming a proper legend at the club.
Congratulations to Sergio Ramos, who also became a dad for the first time as well this week, just 24 hours before that game in Valladolid. So, as we said, congratulations to Sergio. Let's get some brief reaction to that game in Valladolid. Xabi Alonso briefly spoke about Real Madrid's title chances in English in the mix zone.
Obviously, it's going to be really, really difficult, but we have to try to do as well as possible and have to wait for something that is going to be really difficult to happen.
It's going to be very, very tough. Have to keep on going. That has to be the general attitude of the players.
And the lesson comes from Barcelona. It's less than a week that Barcelona's players gave up the league title. It's less than a week that Andres Iniesta talked about a miracle. Xabi Alonso, after the game, in the bit that he said in Spanish, talked about needing results that were improbable. But improbable is not the same as impossible, and this year we've seen that. Now, look, it's not very likely, and if Atletico Madrid win this weekend, for example, Real Madrid cannot win the league on the final day, no matter what else happens. There are not very many combinations. I think it's a total of 7 out of 177 in which Real Madrid can win the league. But those combinations those mathematics are a little bit skewed because, of course, let's not start counting yet because we'll be here all day. Because, of course, that assumes that every single outcome is equally valid or equally possible. Now, I personally think there's a very good chance that Real Madrid will win both of their games. So that has already cut down the number of outcomes, because obviously the number of outcomes includes the possibility of Madrid losing both, or drawing one and drawing the other, or drawing one and losing one. So we're already narrowing it down. It's true that it's going to be very, very difficult for Real Madrid, and it's true that it's not in their hands, whereas it is in the hands of the other two. But it's still not completely gone.
Let's show you some images from Friday's training session at Valdebebas, and worryingly, the injuries mounting up a little bit for Real Madrid, in so much as Pepe, we know, picked up an injury in that game against Valladolid. We'll have to see how that injury develops. He's looking very, very doubtful for the game in Vigo. Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo had to come off, but you can see him moving quite freely as well. Gareth Bale's there as well.
There is a difficult decision to be made for Real Madrid, isn't there? Because here we are saying that, look, they can still win the league, but of course they recognise that it's not that likely. They recognise that the biggest game in possibly the club's entire history, certainly the biggest game in the last 12 years, is coming up, and that therefore that has to be a priority. Now, that's not to say that you rest players to protect them for the Champions League, but it is to say that if in doubt, maybe you would tend towards that. If you think that there's a risk of a breakdown for a player, and you might force it in other circumstances, perhaps Madrid wouldn't force it this time. And in a way, the bigger question really with all these injuries is what happens for that Champions League final. Pepe might not make it. The good news is that Bale, Ronaldo, who've both recently missed games, will make it. Maybe even Sami Khedira will make it. We expect him to play some minutes this weekend against Celta. Don't know if he'll start or not. And so it's hard, isn't it? Because there are two different issues at stake. One is, are they fit to play? And the other is, are they fit enough to play knowing that there's another, frankly, bigger game coming up?
Well, speaking of who's going to play for Real Madrid on Sunday evening, let's take a look at Sid's starting lineup for Real Madrid against Celta Vigo at the Estadio Balaidos on Sunday night. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff, and there aren't too many changes, actually. If we have a look at Sid's starting lineup, we can see that it's pretty much pretty first choice.
I mean, I think Madrid will play with the strongest side they can, but without taking risks. And so without taking risks, Pepe, I think, is out anyway. That's not even a case of risk. That's just Pepe isn't available, which is why it's Ramos and Varane at centre-back. Obviously, there's doubts about Carvajal, so I expect Nacho to play right back. And the big change, as you say, no really big changes in there. The one big change is of course, I haven't included Cristiano Ronaldo, because I think if there's any risk on Ronaldo at all, I'm just not convinced that Ancelotti will want to take that risk because he's so important to the side. And with Bale back and Di Maria either side of Benzema, you've still got the pace to play on the attack and obviously and on the counter-attack rather. And obviously with Alonso, Isco and Modric, you've also got the players to keep the ball and attack more patiently if that's the way you want to go about it.
We should stress the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo left in the 8th minute at Valladolid as a precaution.
Yes, no, and the description of his injury was not really an injury, it was muscle fatigue. So you can almost see it as a scale. Muscle fatigue, the slight risk of some sort of injury, and therefore you don't run that risk and you take him off. The next step up would be what's known in Spain as a sobrecarga, which is essentially a tensing of the muscle fibres, which can lead to a tear, but isn't in itself necessarily a problem and normally puts you out for a week, if that. And then the next stage, of course, is a tear or a pull. Ronaldo's got neither of those main problems, a pull, a tear or a sobrecarga. He's only got fatigue, but fatigue can lead to the next stage, which is why I would still be tempted not to run the risk, because then you've got a week to protect him, at least a week to protect him for the final league game, and 2 weeks perhaps the Champions League.
Well, that's how the Real Madrid squad is looking. Coming into Sunday night's game against Celta-Vigo, it's time for us to take a closer look at the rival. And we're up against the Celta Vigo side, who are on their best run of form of the season. They've won each of their last 3 matches in La Liga, scoring 10 goals in the process, and they're safe, and they will want to put on a bit of a show for their fans.
I think they will, and they've actually been quite a nice side to watch for most of the season. They're very, very quick. They open the pitch out very, very wide. They've got a lot of pace on the counter-attack. They keep the ball reasonably well. They're 9th now, and I think safety was always likely but never secure. And as you say, this is their best form, which in a way I think is just a natural product of a sensible approach where they've been building towards this all the way through the season. They haven't really changed their ideas very much. There's been a few minor bits of tinkering, but fundamentally the way they've played has stayed the same all year. And I think they're really quite a nice side. In theory, they've got nothing to play for, which is good news for Real Madrid. But as you say, I think there will be a desire to put on some kind of show for the fans. There will be a sense of celebration, I think, as well, because they've survived so well. There's the fact that a team like Real Madrid always makes smaller sides want to play better because it's an occasion. And then you've got the other factor, which of course is their manager, Luis Enrique, who's a former Barcelona and Real Madrid player, who it looks likely is going to be the new Barcelona manager, although we haven't had that confirmed just yet.
Funny you should mention Luis Enrique. We'll talk a little bit about him in just a moment. But let's remind ourselves what happened the last time these two sides met. You might actually remember it was the first game of 2014, the day of Reyes, the 6th of January here in Spain. And it was a funny old match, actually, because Real Madrid won 3-0 and it ended up being relatively comfortable. But it was 0-0 at half-time. We needed a goal from Karim Benzema and then too late on from Ronaldo to make it a little bit more comfortable. But Celta actually missed a couple of good chances.
Yeah, they did. It was a very strange game. I remember the conversations at half-time of saying, wow, Celta looked like a really good side and Madrid looked like they're just not right, that they haven't come back from their holidays yet. I thought actually in truth that Celta at half-time had been the better side of the two. By the end, Madrid had pushed them back and eventually found a way through. But the 3-0 probably flatters them a little bit. And I remember Luis Enrique after the game saying that he felt that there was absolutely nothing he could say to his players in terms of you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong. They'd just come up against a brilliant team, which of course is true. But not only that, but they come up against a brilliant team and competed with them and kept the ball well and created chances. I think I remember someone hitting the post or maybe the bar. Charles, that's right. Yeah. On that breakaway, he was one-on-one with the keeper, and I think what we saw there was some of what has made Celta a really good side this year. I must admit, I saw a bit of that as well very early in the season when they went to San Mamés, the first game at the new San Mamés against Athletic Bilbao, and created chances and really ran at them and really opened the pitch out. And I liked them a lot. And lost. And again, and lost. And I like them quite a lot. And I think what's happened is it's taken a while for them to convert some of their good football into results. And I think even earlier in the season when they weren't getting results and there was even half a chance of them maybe being dragged into the relegation battle, even then you felt this is quite a good team.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Luis Enrique, who you mentioned, who got a warm reception from the Bernabeu crowd in that game in January. He's not necessarily Real Madrid fans' favourites. Explain why.
Basically, because he left Real Madrid for Barcelona. In fairness to him,
that's all you need to do. That's the
fundamental one. I mean, in fairness to him, he left Real Madrid for Barcelona because he felt there wasn't a natural place for him in the Real Madrid side. It wasn't that he just kind of upped and left and said, right, I've had enough of you, I don't like you. It was was that he felt he wasn't really playing. But what happened, I think, to really get Real Madrid fans' backs up was that when he went to Barcelona, he really embraced Barcelona, which is fine. But by embracing Barcelona, he was quite public in his, if you like, his rejection of his Real Madrid past. And I remember a very famous quote from him when he said, "Sometimes I see the sticker albums and I see the sticker of me in a white shirt and it feels wrong." And now that's, you know, on an emotional level, that's kind of fair enough, but it's not the kind of thing that fans take warmly to. And I think he very quickly started to identify himself much, much more with Barcelona than he had ever done with Real Madrid.
And he could well be their next manager.
And he could well be their next manager, yeah.
Okay. So Celta Vigo have got a manager who'll be fired up to take on Real Madrid. They've also got a very, very good squad, and we've picked out one player in particular to watch. In terms of forwards, they've got plenty of exciting players, but at the moment, none is more informed than Nolito, who has scored 7 goals in his last 4 matches. In each of his last 3 games, he's scored a brace.
Yeah, Manuel Agudo Duran, for those who want to use his full name, known as Nolito. And as you're saying, they've got quite exciting forwards, and they of course signed Charles in the summer, who'd been the second division's top scorer. I think he got 27 last year, and it's been kind of a bit up and down for him. It's actually been a little bit up and down for Nolito until recent weeks, but I really quite like him. He's a player that was at Barcelona B, worked with Luis Enrique at Barcelona B, was there for I think 3 years between 2008 and 2011, scored a reasonable number of goals, not masses, I think it was about 25, 26 in 100-ish games. Went to Benfica, where again he showed signs of being a very good player without ever completely taking off. Again, it was a kind of a 15-goal season, I think 12 I think it was he got last season with Benfica. But I really quite like him, and as I say, 2 braces in the last few games.
3 braces in the last 3 games. He's scored 3 goals in each of his last 3 games, so he's absolutely on fire. He scored 14 goals this season, and some of them very, very nice indeed. All different types of goals as well, so he's definitely one for us to watch. We can show you some images of Celta Vigo's latest training session. It won't be their last training session, but it's the latest training session at the time of recording. Now, just explain to us how you think Luis Enrique will set up his side, because we've already talked about them being a side that likes to pass the ball around. They're not going to sit back and try and hit Real Madrid on the counter. No,
well, the first thing to say is how he sets up his training session, and it's unusual to see him on the pitch. The first thing Luis Enrique did when he became Celta's manager was basically build a tower at the training ground so he could stand on the tower and oversee the training from above everybody. The way he sets up his team is, broadly speaking, a 4-3-3. The 2 wide men play very, very high up the pitch, very, very wide, with the forward in the middle, almost isolated from them. But of course, the idea is that you break quickly and those wide men really get up close and then either come in or go to the ball and pull back, but actually more often than not come in towards the forward. The midfield will be underpinned by one basic premise, which will be don't lose the ball when you receive it. But the second pass can be a quick outlook pass. So in other words, you don't get it and go straight to the wing. You get it, you assure possession with the first pass, and then you look for the 2 wide men who should be very, very high up the pitch. And they're a side that do allow you to have chances against them. That's one thing that will be good news for Real Madrid. They're not going to do what some of the sides that Madrid have struggled against have done, which is, of course, to use the phrase, park the bus. They'll be a bit more open than that.
It's a 7 p.m. kickoff at the Estadio Balaidos this Sunday, as most matches are actually in Spain this weekend, for Celta Vigo against Real Madrid. Before we take a look at some of the other big games at the top of the table, let's just remind ourselves of how things stand in the La Liga table. We can see there, basically, we need Atletico Madrid to not win, and then things might be possible. Hopefully, Barcelona might drop points away to Elche, and Real Madrid need to win to have any realistic chance of, or any chance at all, of claiming their 33rd La Liga title. So that's how things are looking at the top of the La Liga table. If we take a look at the bottom, it is so tight. Even Espanyol in 12th place need a point to be certain of safety. Everybody below them are looking over their shoulders, absolutely desperate for points as well. And Malaga also need a point, and that's very, very important.
Yeah, Malaga and Elche, the 2
Malaga
teams,
and Elche both need points.
Yeah, who are facing Real Madrid's rivals, both need points. It's possible.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Atletico Madrid against Malaga at the Vicente Calderón. Now, in theory, this is a game that Atletico Madrid should win. In theory, they should have won at Levante last week.
Yes.
In theory, Real Madrid should have won at Valladolid. In theory, Barcelona shouldn't have drawn against Getafe.
In theory, Real Madrid should have beaten Valencia as well. I mean, the last few weeks have been a bit crazy. Barcelona's recent performances have been very disappointing. I actually went back and looked at the last 6 weeks. I don't think Barcelona have played well in 6 weeks in La Liga, which is significant. From Atletico Madrid's point of view, to be honest with you, I thought this was the hardest game in their running. A lot was made of the trip away to Valencia, but I always felt that there was a chance. I didn't expect them to lose, but I felt there was a good chance of them drawing in Valencia against Levante. Malaga, in theory, at least, are a side with nothing to play for. They're also
they need a point.
but they do need a point. Exactly. But I think part of the problem is that a couple of weeks ago they thought they were safe and they let themselves go. And Schuster was talking about this after they were beaten by Getafe, saying, look, whether you like it or not, when you've got nothing to play for, it does kind of take away some of your edge and some of your intensity. The players in Schuster don't particularly get on now, which obviously doesn't help. The likelihood is, of course, an Atletico Madrid victory, but I can see the nerves and the tension playing a part. I can see Malaga being very defensive and trying to gain some pride by perhaps getting a draw off them. And bear in mind, there's one piece of very, very significant team news, which is that Diego Costa will not be available. At least at the moment, it looks like he's not going to be available, that he'll be fine for the following week, but probably not for this weekend.
And, he's not necessarily been in the best form in the last few weeks, but that's still going to be a massive...
And he's still vital to the way they play because of how quickly they look for him, how other people play off him, how aggressive he is, how he moves the defence out of position. I think that's an enormous loss. Now, of course, there's still Villa, Adrian, Raul Garcia as players who can play up front, but none of them are quite as decisive as Costa is.
OK, so we're all going to be sitting there at home at the same time as Real Madrid are playing Celta Vigo. We'll be keeping an eye on what's happening at the Vicente Calderón, and fingers crossed, Vamos Malaga. Hopefully they can get something out of that game. We'll also be going Vamos Elche at the Estadio Martínez Valero, where they take on Barcelona. Elche, of course, a side who at home have been very, very solid. They're unbeaten in their last 9 matches there. They don't score many goals, but they don't concede many either.
Yeah, just one defeat in 10. In those 10 games, they've only conceded 4 at home. It includes 3 0-0 draws, and of course a 0-0 draw would do Barcelona an enormous amount of damage. They've been tough to beat at home, as Real Madrid found out when it took a 95th minute penalty to beat them earlier in the season. They're extremely well organised, very, very defensive. The kind of side, in theory at least, that Barcelona have been struggling against.
Yes.
They're not too bad at all from set plays themselves. The place will be packed and very, very noisy. I think that given the vulnerability that Barcelona have shown, and we're seeing the goal that they conceded against Getafe last week for that 2-2 draw, given the vulnerability that Barcelona have shown, I don't think a slip-up there, I say a slip-up in terms of a draw, for example, would necessarily even be that much of a surprise. Now, the question mark is now, having been given this, if you like, this second chance in a league that they've given up on, can Barcelona effectively kind of reapply themselves? Can they reawaken themselves and say, right, it's only 2 games, let's go for it? Now, in theory, yes, but in practice, I'm not so sure.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's very difficult to mentally change the chip once you might have switched off.
I think that's right. I think that's right, and I think there was an element of them drifting towards the end of the season. They've suddenly been told, hang on, the league title's just there, you can reach out and get it. But I'm not 100% sure if they'll be able to. Elche
away might just be the worst possible game for Barcelona at this stage of the season, particularly how they've been playing. Remember, in the last couple of months, they've lost away at Granada, they've lost away at Valladolid, both sides that are below Elche in the table. Do you see what I'm getting at here, Madridistas? There is still hope, even though it is very, very difficult for us. Right, let's take a look at all the other games then in Spain, up and down the country, because there are still plenty of matters to be resolved. We are going to get Sid's all-important predictions, although there's no matters to be resolved on the 2 games on Saturday. That is why they are playing on Saturday. Villarreal against Rayo Vallecano. Nothing to play for, really.
I can see a 4-all draw in that. I'm going for a draw.
You're going for a draw. Villarreal against Rayo Vallecano at the Madrid. It's the Valencia derby at the Ciudad de Valencia Stadium. Levante against Valencia.
And Valencia have been very, very good lately in terms of getting their minds back on things, but I'm going for Levante because I think Levante at home continue to be a very tough side.
Well, we saw that last weekend as they beat Atletico Madrid. On Sunday then at 5 o'clock, it's the Basque derby at San Mamés, the first Basque derby at the new San Mamés as Athletic Bilbao take on Real Sociedad. Always a special occasion, this.
Athletic lost the last one at the old San Mamés, but I think they're going to win the first one at the new San Mamés.
You've gone for a home win there. Right, all the other games kicking off at 7 p.m. because there is plenty to play for in these matches, not least at the Vicente Calderón, where we are fingers crossed hoping that Atletico Madrid can drop some points.
And I'm going to go for a draw in this. I think there is a chance. I think Malaga can maybe frustrate them, make life difficult. I don't see Malaga as having much attacking intent, but perhaps enough to make life difficult for them.
OK, we've already talked about how difficult it could be for Barcelona at Elche, a defensive side, a side who are in form at home, who also need points.
And I'm going for a draw in that one as well. I genuinely think that a draw is I think it's more probable in the Elche Barcelona game than in the Atletico Madrid Malaga. But I think it's possible in both.
Okay, Sid is giving us some hope. That is what we like to hear. Getafe against Sevilla. Getafe very much in need of points.
Yeah, and the Champions League place taken off Sevilla, which makes me think Getafe.
Sevilla with very, very little to play for indeed. It's an Andalusian derby at the bottom of the table. Plenty to play for both of these sides. Granada against Almeria.
Granada, because they're playing at home.
Betis are already relegated. They were the first team to be relegated this season. They're taking on a side who are desperate to avoid the same fate. We saw Valladolid be stubborn against Real Madrid, if unspectacular.
And it's hard to imagine anything other than a Valladolid victory, if only because they need it and Betis simply don't, and Betis have been adrift for such a long time now.
Espanyol have been treading water in mid-table for a long time, so long in fact that they are almost being sucked back into the relegation troubles.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it, because both them and Malaga thought they were safe and then kind of let things slip and suddenly found themselves in a position where they're not. And I go for a draw in that one.
And
I'm lying. I go for an Osasuna win. I'd forgotten which.
You forgot what you said. You said an away win.
That shows how convinced I am by that decision, doesn't it?
And the final one, of course, the big one for us at Balaidos, Celta against Real Madrid.
I genuinely do think this is difficult for Real Madrid.
Yeah.
I do. I think Celta are a good side. But I'm going to go for a Real Madrid victory, and I'm going to go for a league title race that runs into the final week.
Well, Carlo Ancelotti has said all season that the league title will be decided on the final day of the season. It remains to be seen whether he and indeed Sid Lowe are correct. That's all we've got time for on this edition of The Match. Hope you've enjoyed the programme. The match in question, of course, is a 7 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. Celta Vigo against Real Madrid. Until next time, it's adios.